So last week we started looking at the book of Proverbs. So Proverbs is one book, but it does have different sections. So we all know where you should be up to today. You should be up to Proverbs 11. Very good. So you should be up to Proverbs 11 at the moment. If you're curious, I've segmented everything and mapped it all out. So we will be Proverbs for January and February. That's what we'll finish, because there's, if you want to know where we're going, I will show you. So there are different sections. We're currently in the opening section of Proverbs, which is generally classified as Proverbs chapters 1 to 9. So if you're up to date, you're past that now. And we looked at chapters 1 and 2 last week. So in chapters 1 and 9, we have the introduction, which we looked at last time. And then in chapter 1, we also have the introduction to Lady Wisdom and her public call and a warning to the simple. Then we move into the next section, which we're going to do today, but we did chapter 2 last week, so we're going to do 3 to 7. And that's core instructions on seeking wisdom's protection, trusting God, personal integrity, avoiding adultery, and other warnings against things like slothfulness and laziness. And then in chapter 8, we have wisdom speech. And this reaches a climax in chapter 9 with wisdom and folly's invitations. And there's different parallels made to help us understand what's going on. And then we shift into Proverbs 10 to 29, which is probably the most well-known section to us when we think of Proverbs. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. When we get to Proverbs 10 to 29, that covers the Proverbs that we kind of think of when we think of the book of Proverbs. That's shorter, either say one thing and then expand on it, or have antithetical Proverbs. And it's short, kind of pithy sayings, things that we would do well to heed. And then there's some loose thematic clusters in that, but we'll get to that later on. Then in Proverbs 30, we have the words of Agur, the son of Jakeh, which is structured around confessions of human imitation, a call to imitate the words of the speaker. We have various themes there, which we'll deal with on its own, Proverbs 30. And then we'll have Proverbs 31, which is presented as King Lemuel's mother's instruction to her son, which is King Lemuel. We'll deal about who that is when we get there. When we get to Proverbs 31, we'll deal with who King Lemuel was, who his mother was, why that's important. And then it concludes with Proverbs 31, the woman of valor. And that's important. And we're going to spend a whole section on Proverbs 31 woman, whose worth is more than jewels, is above all other things that we can find on the earth. And that's a call, and it's worthy of our time, because it's a call to men to find and to be worthy of a Proverbs 31 woman. And it's a call to women to emulate and to follow the example and to be the Proverbs 31 woman. So we will deal with that in its own section. But today we are in Proverbs 3 to 7. And Proverbs 3 opens in a similar fashion to what we saw last time in Proverbs 1 and 2. My son, do not forget my teaching, but have heart, comply with my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. So again, this starts in a similar fashion to last week, and we have a father pleading with his son that he hear the words of his advice and takes it on board and follows his instruction. And I imagine this to be something what it must be like if we read this through slowly and we hear the words, read the words on the page. I imagine this to be something akin to what God has done for us in giving his word, as he tells us in, I don't know about you, but I make lots of there's no sin I haven't, there's no box on the sin bingo card that I haven't ticked, and a lot of them I've fallen into multiple times. And I imagine God saying to me again and again, don't do that, or do this, do this, do this, do this, and so often I don't listen. So I imagine that this is something like maybe God in his imploring us to follow his ways, to follow his word, because if we do, it will go well for us. And God trying to tell us that this is the standard that we should follow, and this is the measure we're to use when we're going through life. Isaiah 55:3 tells us, this is God speaking, incline your ear and come to me. Listen that you may live, and I will make an everlasting covenant with you according to the faithful mercies shown to David. And God has made promises. We've covered that a lot before. He's made promises, and he's made everlasting covenants with his people. and he's shown us mere mortals what is good, Micah 6:8, and he continually calls to each of us to follow his ways. And in Proverbs, in this chapter, we have the father, Solomon, doing the same thing. He's calling to his son, and he's calling him to listen to him and follow what his instructions are. And as we go through Proverbs 3, we get to one of the most famous Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. It's well known to many of us. Some of us might have it on our living room wall or on our Bible cover or something. Very well known verse. We know it well, but it's worthy to look at it because how well do we actually follow it? Because we often take heart in this passage. This is something that people will use to comfort people who are having a bad go. Something's happened, some tragedy has happened, and they use this passage to try and comfort them. Because of the promise that the Lord will lead us and make our path straight. We've got, in all your ways, God will make your path straight. It's okay. But there's conditions here. There are conditions here. There's at least 3. Number 1, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Number 2, do not lean on or do not rely on your own understanding. Number 3, acknowledge him. Yield to his leading. Yield to him. Follow his instruction in everything that you do. And if we do those things, and then he will make your path straight. But so often we just want the last bit. The reason that verse is comforting to so many of us is because we think that we can not do the former, but we will get the latter. Because we want the promise that God will lead us and make our path straight without trusting the Lord with all our heart and without relying on him and relying on our own intelligence, our own wisdom, our own money, our own vocation or job, our own skills or our own knowledge. And as we walk into a new day, we have to ask ourselves, are we wholly reliant on the Lord, or are we trusting in our own abilities? Are we trusting in ourselves to provide for ourselves rather than him, rather than waiting on the Lord to provide for us? And we need to be aware of this because so often we just want that end blessing without following all the conditions that God has said, do this and then this will happen. We just want that to happen while we're working our own way. We do whatever we want to do, we go wherever we want to go, and then when things go wrong, or especially after things go wrong and we've disobeyed God, then we say, God, make our path straight now. But you're in this horrible, terrible spot now. And then so often people will turn and then they say, well, how could God do this to me? Or if your God is so good, then how could he have allowed such a terrible thing to happen? And if God's really going to make my path straight, well, why am I in now this horrible mess? Well, maybe because we didn't actually do what God told us to do. And sometimes God, in his love for us, allows us to have our way. Proverbs 3 verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. But what if we are wise in our own eyes, and what if we pursue evil paths? Well, it will not be healing for our body, rather it will be destructive to us. For example, this says, do be wise in your own eyes. But if we consume, ungodly content, if we puff ourselves up with pride and self-accomplishment, we've turned away from God and the refreshment and healing for us that's promised in his word if we follow his ways, that doesn't come to us. Proverbs 3 verses 11 and 12. I got ahead of myself, sorry. Proverbs 3 verse 11 and 12 says, my son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord or loathe his rebuke. Ooh, that's a bit rough. Do not reject the discipline of the Lord or loathe his rebuke. For whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, just as a father disciplines the son in whom he delights. And so often we turn away from God, we do not follow his ways, and we can make a real mess of things. And God may, in that moment, allow the misfortune to fall upon us in his attempt to try and call us back to him, in his attempt to rebuke us in his hope that we will come back. But in that moment, we have to ask ourselves if we are willing to hear him. Will we hear God's rebuke and correction, or when things go wrong, does that cause us to turn away from him even more? To say, you shouldn't have done this, God. This has gone badly for me and I'm not happy. This shouldn't have happened. And in another example of God's command to us is found in Proverbs 3 as well. In Proverbs 3 verses 9 to 10 it says that we are to honour the Lord from your wealth. Honour the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce. And then your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. We are to honour the Lord with our wealth and the first of all our produce. And yet there's no short, so that verse is in Proverbs. It's not found in the it's not in the Levitical law, not in the first 5 books of Moses. This is in Proverbs. This is wisdom that is given to us. And yet there's no shortage of people today that will teach Christians that they don't need to give to the church, they don't need to tithe, they do not need to give their resources of anything. Just make up your own mind, do what you will. Now, sure, if you can give, but do as you wish. Sure, if you can give, people say, if you can give, then you give a little bit, then if you want to, that's fine, but you don't have to. You don't have to. There's no requirement for Christians to tithe. And I would challenge us all, and I say this, to all of you as friends, that what this has done, an instruction for people to say you don't need to tithe, you don't need to give, it has brought a generation of greedy and stingy and ungiving Christians. Not looking at anyone here, but in the general, that is what it has brought. Because when should we give? The instruction here in Proverbs, this is just good advice for our learning. When should we give? We should give from the first of all our produce. Now, some of us aren't necessarily farmers, so you don't get a harvest and then all the produce comes in, but every week we might get a paycheck or something. And the Bible tells us that we should give when we first get it, the first of our produce. So when we receive money, we should give it generously and we should honour the Lord with what he gives us. Now, this is not a passage in the Levitical law where someone says, oh no, that applied to the Jewish people, that doesn't apply to us. This is here for our learning. It's God's command. It's God's instruction to us. And I, just to, in the further thing where people say, well, Christians aren't required to tithe, they're not required to give to the church, that's not something they're required to do. Well, approximately 650 years before Moses gave the law to the Israelites, so when they were required, here's the law and here's how you're required to give to the temple and how you're to give to provide for the Levites. About 650 years before that happened, Abraham won a great military victory. And we'll cover that another day. Abraham, if you didn't know, had his own private army. And he took that private army after a group of kings sacked the land and kidnapped Lot. And Abraham wanted Lot back. So he took his own private army to go and get Lot back again. And he went and he won the day. He defeated these kings and their armies. And then with all the spoils of the war that he got after he won, Abraham went to Melchizedek, who was the king and priest of Salem, which in later on times would become Jerusalem. But he went to Melchizedek and he gave him tithes of what he won. He gave him 1/10 of all his spoils. But this is about 650 years before God gave the command to Moses to tithe. So why did Abraham do that? And if we go back further again before that, if we go back 2,000 years before Abraham, Cain and Abel brought sacrifices and offerings of their first fruits. Now, one was accepted and one not, and that's a whole other conversation. But Cain and Abel brought sacrifices to the Lord. They brought offerings to the Lord of the first fruits of their produce. So evidently, God's people have always known that they are required to honour the Lord with their wealth and the first fruits of their produce. That was always the case. And then the Levitical law at Sinai laid that down for the Jewish people on how they were to do it and what they were to give and when. But it was always the case that they were to give. And the same is true today. And like anything that God calls us to do, it's a sacrifice that we make. It is indeed a sacrifice if we give our resources away and give them to the Lord. That is a sacrifice we make. But we are to honour the God with our wealth and make that sacrifice. And that's in our wealth of time, it's in our wealth of resources, it's in our wealth of finances. It's an unpopular message, but it is something that we should be reminding of. And the offering to God in our time is one of the most important things that we can give, because we need to be mindful of that as well as being mindful of offering things to God financially. We're to honour God with our time. And what a wonderful thing it would be, for example, and maybe in your reading of Proverbs you might choose to do this, to wake up each day, and as we awaken the new day, to offer as a sacrifice to the Lord our first moments of waking time to God. That could be in prayer, it could be in worship, it could be in devotional time. For we're to give that time to God that we might grow in grace and knowledge of Him, and also that He would bless what we are doing in recognising Him and seeking to come before Him. Okay. Proverbs, where are we here? Oh no, I've still got ahead of myself. Sorry, I haven't got that one in there either. Okay, anyway, Proverbs 3 verse 13 to 15 before we get to 23. Blessed is the person who finds wisdom and one who obtains understanding, for her profit is better than the profit of silver, and her produce better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire compares with her. So this is a reference of Lady Wisdom again in the feminine. And this is the irony. It details the irony of any sacrifice that we make to God. If we sacrifice and give up our time and give that to the Lord as an offering, if we set time aside to read His word, to pray, to worship Him, to devotionally seek Him, to seek His truth and grow in understanding, and then if we do that, God promises us that we will find Him when we seek Him for all our heart, with all our heart. And the blessing of wisdom that we receive is better than silver, gold and jewels. So we can set time aside for the Lord, and that is a sacrifice in our day, but what we receive is more precious than anything else that we could possibly receive. Because in each day we will seek after something. We might seek after wisdom and understanding. We might seek after the Lord. Or some of us might want to seek after whatever is doom scrolling on our phones, or turning our brains off to whatever mindless or ungodly content that's on streaming or TV that evening. We can pursue understanding and growth and wisdom, and we can pursue God, or we can pursue the world. And the pursuit of wisdom, the pursuit of the Lord, can seem like a sacrifice. Oh, I don't really feel like doing that right now. But it helps us to grow, and it helps us to not take the foolish path of the ungodly person. Proverbs 3:23. Then you will walk in your way securely, and your foot will not stumble. So we do all these things, and then you will walk securely. If we dedicate time to the Lord, if we seek after Him, if we grow in grace and understanding, if we grow in wisdom, then you will walk in your way securely. And that theme of do this, receive this, it continues. It's seen again and again in Proverbs, and it's not just in Proverbs 3, it bleeds over into Proverbs 4. And in Proverbs 4, we see the Father again going on and on. And if you read it and just take take note of all the, listen, my sons, hear me when I say this. Listen to me. My son, listen to this. Pay attention to me. And he goes on and on and on and on and on. And have a look at this in just the first few verses of Proverbs 4. We'll just cover it here. Listen, Proverbs 4 verses 1 to 2. Listen, my sons, to the instruction of a father, and pay attention so that you may gain understanding. For I give you good teaching. Do not abandon my instruction. Listen, my son, and accept my sayings, and the years of your life will be many. I have instructed you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in upright paths. My son, pay attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. They are not to escape from your sight. Keep them in the midst of your heart. Listen, accept, pay attention. The repetition here of the father talking to his son is imploring him to listen. It almost seems like he's begging him to listen. Please listen to me. And if we understand the mistakes that Solomon made, that depending on when he wrote all this and put it all together, we might understand that after all of the mistakes he's made, he's saying, don't make the mistakes I did. Or this also, and it's an image to me again of the Creator of all things speaking to us, pleading with us to follow His ways and to reject the world's ways and to just listen to the Lord. For in Him is where wisdom and understanding is. Proverbs 4 verses 25 to 27. Let your eyes look directly ahead and let your gaze be fixed straight in front of you. And watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the left or the right or the left. Turn your foot from evil. And that's the way we're to walk. In all our ways we acknowledge the Lord, but we take the narrow path that leads to life, and we need to be mindful that it is a narrow path. It's a narrow path. but how often we can seek to take the broad path to do things what we want to do, and we start widening that path and getting on that broad path that leads to destruction. And as we get to Proverbs 5 and 7, we're having a quick look here, but Proverbs 5 to 7 outlines some of the ways that do indeed lead to destruction. These passages contrast two ways. They say you can do this and it leads to this, or you can do this and it leads to that. They contrast two ways in which we can choose to walk, one which leads to life and one that leads to death, one that leads to blessing and one that leads to cursing. And the first one of these, and the example we're going to develop, the two that are most vivid here are probably the adulterous woman and then the sluggard or the slothful person, depends on what translation you're reading. We'll deal with the sluggard in a future session, but today we're just going to look at a little bit in Proverbs 5 to 7 as Proverbs references the adulteress, which is referenced in Proverbs 5 and 7. My son, pay attention to my wisdom, incline your ear to my understanding, so that you may maintain discretion and your lips may comply with knowledge. For the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold of Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life, her ways are unstable, and she does not know it. So Proverbs 5 goes on. Now, if you're in the teenage category, see your parents, mum and dad, and go through these passages with them. It's worthy of your time. We'll do a little bit today, but it is really, really worthy of your time. Proverbs 5 and 7 details the immoral woman, the adulteress, and the one who entices men, or in our own age, women as well, to destruction. Now, just this week, there was a lot of ink spilt over the revelations that a prominent Christian writer has just admitted to an 8-year extramarital affair. Now, this isn't the first professing Christian individual who's had an affair, and tragically it won't be the last, but that doesn't make it right, and it's not to be condoned. But in the aftermath of what's happened, it shows the damage that can be done by a sin, which is just a very prominent Christian individual, written a lot of books, given a lot of messages, and now we're seeing their books pulled, engagements cancelled, people advocating that no one should ever listen to them again, their books should be never referenced, they should be destroyed. And putting aside whether Christians engage with the materials written by that particular individual, the absolute carnage here to the Christian world is very significant. And that's before we get to his personal life and his poor wife that's just figuring out all this. And today it could be argued, perhaps, that there is no greater scourge. I would certainly argue that there's probably no greater scourge in society than sexual immorality, and specifically that which begins in pornography. And today we're increasingly in a culture that not only celebrates sexual immorality, but it seems that games are being played as individuals engaged in that pursuit in pornography seek to upend each other and outcompete each other with ever more depraved and ungodly acts, one more disgusting than the other that came before it. And more men and women, but particularly men, are enticed down this spiral into sexual immorality. And if we just instructed our young men and women better, this could be avoided. So many people, particularly young men that I speak to, they just never had anybody talk to them about this before. And then they end up in a terrible mess, addicted to all sorts of things, and no one had ever told them, stay away from this. This is just soul cancer. Stay away from it. Don't get involved. And it's not just necessarily, don't do all this stuff that looks good. No, there's a better path to go on. It's much, much better. There's a better way to go. There's a godly way, and it is a better path to tread. But so often, and not looking at anybody necessarily, but so often just in the general, parents, grandparents, the church are just silent on this issue. They don't want to deal with it. Now let me be clear to everyone, if you had any illusions, it is not acceptable on any level, to engage with pornography ever. Christ himself said that if we look at a woman with lust in your heart, you have already committed adultery with her. And we live in a time, unfortunately, that takes a great amount of discipline and self-control to keep this temptation at bay. Because it is increasingly acceptable for women and men to engage engage and act in a sexually inappropriate manner. Just this week, I was driving through Young, which I don't often do, and I saw two young girls, and I assume they were walking to the gym. And a few years ago, we would have described the attire these two young lasses were wearing as nothing short of their underwear. There was nothing more on than that. And while we can call it activewear now, this is not appropriate attire. And it should not be seen in public. There was once a time when we looked at our own selves and our own bodies as so precious that these were only things that our spouses got to enjoy and our spouses got to see. And that's what we need to return to. It's not prudish behaviour, it's prudent behaviour. And the response to such behaviour, when we see someone out and about wearing something inappropriate, for women, it's to identify that behaviour as inappropriate and to ensure they don't act in a similar way. They don't dress in a similar way. And for men, the correct response for all of us as males is to look away, or as that would be said in a prior time, to avert your eyes. Not to stare, not to look, not to flirt with temptation, but in the old language, we avert our eyes and look away. And if we as a society had done that, and if we called this behaviour out and labelled it as inappropriate, and men refused to look at people who wanted to dress inappropriate, we would not be in the state we're in now. These issues would not be nearly as prevalent. And Luke 6:44, Jesus says, "For each tree is known by its own fruit. For people do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they pick grapes from a briar bush." So the temptation might be there. The temptation is there. There's a million different temptations in our world each and every day for us. Now, with a man or woman acting or dressing inappropriately, they may choose to do this, but nothing good comes of indulging in that temptation, of looking or engaging with that temptation. Nothing good comes of it. You can't pick figs from a thorn bush. And to all the young people here, and I'm not picking on you, it can sound like everything that the Bible offers you is a path of self-denial and sacrifice and misery while everybody else gets to do the good stuff. And it can sound like all that God is calling you to is to miss out on all the fun stuff that everybody else gets to participate except for you. But believe me, the fun doesn't last. Stolen fruits appear sweet, but they are not sweet. They are bitter, and they are bitter indeed. And you can think you're eating grapes from a thorn bush until you start reading that your mouth is bleeding because you've got a mouthful of thorns. But we can be, I admit it, you can look at all this and you can say this all looks rather depressing. This is just a whole bunch of stuff that says you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. Now, I've gone into this in the way that the Bible introduces it, and you can react going, well, look at all this stuff I can't do. All my friends can do whatever they want, but I can't do anything. And that can seem like it's not fair. It can seem like the good stuff, the fun stuff, is something that's off limits to us. It can seem like we're just trying to drive around town in our lives. We're just trying to drive around and God keeps putting road closed signs in front of us. Oh, I can't go that way, I can't go this way. Oh, I can't go that way, I can't go this way. I can't go that way either. But like the earlier passages where Proverbs, the pattern we've looked at today is God says, do these good things and these good things happen. Or don't do these bad things and then these bad things won't happen. God outlines, he says, don't do these things. Don't do these things, these aren't good. But then he paints us a picture of all the beautiful things that come if we just follow his path. And it's an instruction to act in a certain way or to avoid a certain temptation and to pursue after a godly behaviour, and that if we do, there are these godly things, these beautiful things that come to us. And this is that in the old language it can be hard to come through, so I'll try and pull a little bit out for us as we finish off here. Proverbs 5 verses 5 to 15. Drink water from your own cistern, that is, basically drink from your own sink, drink water out of your own tank, don't go next door and drink out of somebody else's. Should your springs overflow into the street, streams of water in the public squares, let them be yours alone and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. Like a loving doe and a graceful mountain goat, probably not the things I would use to describe your wife nowadays, but you can try and see how that works out for you. Let her breast satisfy you at all times and be exhilarated always with her love. Now, what is all that about? That is saying that what you want to do is you want to find the one the godly spouse that God has for you, the one that loves the Lord even more than you do, and to be joyful and to be with them. And what society tells you, young people, is that what you should do is not what God says. What God says is that you want to find a godly spouse, marry them, and embark on a lifelong journey with them through life together for as long as you live. Now, for the young man, that is to find a woman who has a faith stronger than you do, and someone that you love so much that you're even willing to sacrifice your life for, someone you're willing to die for. Now, what you're looking for is trying to find someone who you're willing to serve through godly leadership, through service and provision for them and protection of them, who you'll cleave to, join as one flesh to, and faithfully journey through life with them, with the Lord as the head of your marriage. Always willing to protect and lay down your life in an instant for her if that is required. And for the young woman, you're to seek a godly husband, one who is worthy, important words, one who is worthy of your submission, who you know is willing to sacrifice and die for you. One who loves you more than their own life. One who has a greater faith than you do. One that loves the Lord with all their heart, all their mind, all their strength and all their soul, and will lead you in a godly manner, even willing to lay down their life for you. And the option here is the one, the other option here is the one who seeks after the adulterous woman and falls into ruin, or the one who pursues the godly spouse and who is faithful to them, is satisfied with them. And the words here, you say you can go this way and there's pain and ruin and suffering. But what God is calling us all to, if we're called to marriage, and he calls most people to marriage, he's calling us to be overly satisfied with our spouse, to be exhilarated by our spouse, to be blessed from youth to old age with our spouse, to be in godly union with them, to be joyous in our marriages. This is the godly path. Even the language it uses, if we take time to understand it, paints a better picture of the direction that we should go in. Now, some people will point out that infidelity and adultery and sexual immorality and divorce are common features of marriage today. And yes, indeed, that is tragically true. However, I would ask how many marriages begin in these things to begin with. They start in sexual immorality, in infidelity, in adultery, and then they end badly. How many of these marriages fail because they begin in these things, and a marriage that begins in those things can so often end in those things. Picking thorns off it, trying to pick figs off a thorn bush. But if a marriage did begin in those things, in infidelity or adultery or sexual immorality, if a marriage did begin in these things, the couple comes together and they repent of that. They seek God to redeem their marriage, to bless it and to make it stronger than ever, and to give them back the years that they lost in that sinful state. It doesn't mean that it can't be redeemed, and that God can make it better than ever. But for the young person, for the young people here who are journeying through life, take the godly path and leave the worldly path alone, because you can't pick figs off a thorn bush. Do it God's way and see the beauty in what he's describing to you. He's describing blessing. He uses the word of blessing, of satisfaction, of joy, of exhilaration and faithfulness, as opposed to bitterness, hurt, pain and death. So as we read Proverbs 5 and 7, and we all should do it, whether we're young or old, we should consider the warnings to the ones seeking to engage in sexual immorality, and to consider them, heed them and follow them, and look to the godly standard and the beautiful picture that it paints. Don't just see the things we can't do and resent them and get bitter about it, because we're not reading the Bible correctly if we do that. What we want to do is we want to see the blessing that God promises us and desire after seeking it. We want to hate the worldly standard and we want to love the godly standard. Now the hymn writer says, the Lord has promised good to me. My word, my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. And in the Proverbs, that's what God promises. He promises good to those who follow his commandments and keep his ways. And I pray that that's all what we do. Because the world looks enticing, but we can't be enticed by it. And talking of the adulterous woman, Proverbs 6:25 says, do not desire the beauty in her heart, in your heart, nor let it capture you with her eyelids. Do not desire the beauty in your heart, her beauty in your heart. And that's a lesson to all of us, because we should remember that even worldly things that are not of God in the world can look beautiful. We should remember that in 2 Corinthians 11:4, Paul tells us that Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. And we'll get to this in a future session, but Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way of death. So it can look good, but if the Bible tells us this is not the way we should go, it might be tempting and we might look at that and think, I don't think I should go that way, but it looks pretty good, looks easy, that's an easy way to go, but there's a way that seems right to a person, but is the way of death. So we need to ask ourselves which way we should go, the way of the Lord or the way of the world. Because that's the choice that's before us every day. It's the choice we have every week. And I pray that we can choose the right way. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. It is a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us and it can be a real struggle. But if we take the time to look at God's word, we will see that God isn't preventing us from taking the good path. God isn't trying to hold us back from taking the better route. He's calling us to the better path. And he's calling us away from the worldly ways that can seem good to us but are not. They are the ways that lead to death, and God is always calling us back to the path that leads to life. Because all that Satan offers is death, and what Christ offers is life, and it all comes down to what we will choose.